Hi, everybody. Welcome. Hello and welcome. Happy Wednesday. My name is Melissa Moritz. I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of STEM here at the U.S. Department of Education. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you today to our first Google Hangout, which is a follow-up to the White House STEM Symposium on Early STEM. This Google Hangout is aimed at highlighting the innovative work that organizations are doing across the nation to utilize technology to support early science, technology, engineering, and mathematics learning. As you may recall, in April, the White House held a symposium on early STEM to highlight the importance of promoting science, technology, engineering, and math education for our nation's youngest learners. At the event, there were several breakout sessions that focused on different aspects of early STEM learning. There was a ton of interest in attending these sessions, but unfortunately very limited availability. And so the Office of STEM and the Office of Early Learning here at ED decided to host two interactive discussions on two of these topics, the first of which is happening today. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Today's session will provide an opportunity to hear some of the commitment makers discuss the ways to further our use of technology in the area of early STEM education. I am joined by my colleague Libby Doggett, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy and Early Learning in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, and Russ Schilling, the Executive Director of STEM. They will serve as our content area experts today. We are also joined by 5 amazing commitment makers located throughout the country. Just to mention them quickly, we have Andrew Mackles from Nickelodeon, we have Celine Willard from the Jim Henson Company, we have Kim Brenneman from the Heising Simons Foundation, Emily Roden from Ready Rosie, and Elizabeth McClure from the Joan Gantz Cooney Center. We would like to welcome all of you who are viewing this event over the internet via live stream, as well as those who are following along on Twitter and catching all of the action there. Before we begin, I would love to give Libby and Russ a moment to share a few thoughts before we start our conversation.
Well, thank you, Melissa, and thank you, commitment makers. It was a great day at the White House, and I'm delighted that we can now share this with the whole country because it was indeed exciting for me. I come at Early Tech from both the teacher perspective and the grandparent perspective. I have 4 young grandchildren, and watching them with technology and watching my own daughters and son-in-laws struggle with how do we use it, what should we be doing, has really enlightened me and been a catalyst for doing more work in this area. And then as I've traveled around the country visiting early learning centers, I've seen teachers struggling. First, I've seen very little technology use in classrooms, and while we don't want to overuse it, we want to make sure that there's equitable use and access to technology and that teachers are learning. I've always felt like in early learning particularly that since we were a little behind the curve on getting engaged in technology, that maybe we could catch up, but we could do it in a really smart way by learning from our older brothers and sisters and making sure that we use technology in the most effective ways, which we know will enhance children's learning, increase their interaction with their adults and their classmates, and help them learn a lot more than they would without it. So I'm delighted that we're going to feature these great programs out there and excited to hear more.
Over to Russ.
Yes, and so I'm coming to this from a slightly different direction. So I have a background in ed tech development and program management in the area, and also on the research side. And so everything Libby said I totally agree with, and I also believe that one of the things we want to accomplish today and in our conversations going forward is to figure out not only how best to use education technology in the classroom to improve STEM education, but also to give better information to developers on how to build what teachers and students need in this area. So between those two areas, I think we've got a big agenda here. One of the primary things that the STEM office wanted to accomplish when we stood up 2 years ago was to really push for early learning in STEM. And so that's where we're going on this. And we have some good things going on here at the department. So one program to look at what's already been accomplished and what will be accomplished in the coming years is our Ready to Learn program. Ready to Learn just published a whole series of reports on their last program, which was based on teaching mathematics in early learning. using various types of media, while we're now standing up a new program over the next few years looking at science instruction in these same age groups. So really, we're interested in your feedback and hearing from people not only who are speaking today, but who have really good ideas out in the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Libby and Russ. We want to remind folks out there that you can participate in the discussion by submitting questions for us and for our Hangout presenters via Twitter. We'll be using the handle @ED_OII, as well as the hashtag STEM starts early. So please join us in that conversation. Send us your questions. If we don't have a chance to get to them today, we will make sure to follow up through ongoing blogs and opportunities. We definitely want to hear from all of you. Let's get started learning about our great organizations. Let's begin with Kim from the Heising-Simons Foundation. Kim, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing, particularly in early tech?
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Brenneman. I'm a program officer at the Heising-Simons Foundation, and my grant making at the foundation focuses on early mathematics learning for children from birth to age 5. Along with early math, the education program at the Heising-Simons Foundation focuses on family engagement, dual language learners, and efforts to achieve a higher quality, better funded early childhood system through policy and advocacy efforts. Within the early math portfolio, we aim to inspire greater understanding of early math as a catalyst and contributor to children's later school success and their engagement and learning. A number of the projects that we fund involve technology-delivered approaches to engaging children and adults in math and to using technology as a tool to further children's learning. I'm honored and excited to be here to learn with all of you about the promise and challenges of using technology to support early STEM learning and teaching.
Thanks, Kim. And let's head over to our colleague, Emily. Emily from Ready Rosie, do you mind sharing a little bit about you and your work?
Absolutely. My name is Emily Roden, and about 4.5 years ago, myself and a team of early childhood experts and educators joined together to really think about equipping but also inspiring parents around early STEM, early problem solving, critical thinking, and of course early literacy. And so what we do is we deliver tips and ideas that are based in research to families. So your average everyday family has those at their fingertips. But what's really unique about what we have found, especially in the area of STEM, is that video modeling really has an impact on those families and how they interact with the content. So we now have around 1,200 video tips that really model different games and activities that that families can do with their young children. And just to give you a quick example, for example, while a family might be sitting at a restaurant waiting on their food, they could play a pattern game with the sugar packets or the items that are sitting at the restaurant, and develop different patterns and things like that. So just different practical ways that families can interact with their young children in English and in Spanish.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emily. I can't wait to dig in more to that. Elizabeth from the Joan Gans Cooney Center, share a little bit about you and your work.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth McClure. I'm a research fellow at the Joan Gans Cooney Center at Sesame Workshop. I got my PhD in developmental psychology and public policy at Georgetown University, where I was conducting research on how babies and toddlers use video chat. And here at the Cooney Center, I'm co-leading an NSF project that works to identify and help to relieve some of the barriers that keep STEM out of early childhood environments. And I'm also leading several research studies that look at how families find and choose educational apps for their children between the ages of 2 and 8.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'm excited to dig into that, in particular our youngest learners, in just a second. Celine from the Jim Henson Company, share a little bit about yourself and your organization with the audience.
Hi, I'm Celine Willard with the Jim Henson Company. We produce all kinds of entertainment, and especially for this crowd, we produce preschool shows rooted in educational curriculum, and they are across PBS Kids, Hulu, Netflix, and the likes.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Celine. And Andrew, last but not least, tell us a little bit about your work in early STEM.
Absolutely. So I'm Vice President of Public Affairs at Nickelodeon. And at Nickelodeon, we're creating content for kids 2 to 11 and really kids of all ages. Our mission is to make the world a more playful place, and we try to do that in all sorts of ways. Most of my work in the CSR realm works on our pro-social programs in the Nick Jr. space, so the kindergarten area. And that's primarily through our program Beyond the Backpack, which has kind of identified 5 areas that our partners have shared with us are critical to educational success. The first, of course, being family engagement, and then STEM, health and wellness, literacy, and social emotional skills. So most of our work is through that program.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for being here. I love the focus on fun and lots of different platforms, lots of different opportunities in school, out of school, complementing school districts' work, engaging parents. We have a ton to talk about today. It's going to be a fun conversation.
Absolutely.
So let's dive in. We received a ton of questions over social media in advance of this meeting and our meeting in April. One of the most frequent questions we hear is how to navigate the sheer amount of stuff that is out there and what is most likely to support my child or my students' learning. Elizabeth, I know you've thought a lot about this question. Could you kick us off with some thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think what these questions are referring to is what we at the CUNY Center like to call the digital Wild West. So there's just this overwhelming amount of content out there, and much of it is claiming that it helps children learn, but the reality is that much of this is unregulated and untested. So I think the important thing to do here is when you're trying to choose the right technology for your particular situation, you should try to unpack that statement that something can help children learn. And so you can ask yourself first, who are the children? And then second, how do they learn? And that first question, of course, that's something that's going to be different in each case. And so your search is definitely going to be affected by that. But the other question, how do children learn? That leads us to certain principles that apply across most children based on research from the learning sciences. So Kathy Hirsch-Pasek, for example, and her colleagues wrote a wonderful article where they defined the 4 pillars of educational apps, which is based on these principles from the learning sciences, and I believe that it applies to most educational technologies and really to learning in general. So when you're scouting for a good learning tool, you can use those 4 pillars to narrow down your options, and I'll just quickly walk through what those 4 pillars are. So remember that kids and people generally learn best when, one, and this is the first pillar, they are engaged with the material and undistracted by peripheral features. So this is kind of subtle because there's a balance to be drawn here between wanting the content or the technology to be engaging for kids, but you also want to remember that more bells and whistles isn't necessarily better. So you want the engaging features, they should have a purpose, and that purpose should be to focus the child's engagement on the learning goal. So any feature, no matter how entertaining or exciting it is, that doesn't focus that engagement on the learning goal can run the risk of distracting the child from the educational content rather than engaging them in it. So you want to avoid things that have, for example, lots of mini games on the side or that have a lot of content to explore that isn't driven by the educational goal. The second pillar is that it should actively involve the child. So what I mean by that is that they're leaning forward, it's the minds-on activity level, and it's harder to do this with videos, though it is possible. It's much easier to get active involvement in content that has a serve and return approach that really asks something of the child and expects feedback and action from the child. So this is one of the reasons that educational games can be such a powerful learning tool for kids. Then the third pillar is that you want the content to be embedded in meaningful experiences that relate to the child's lives. So kids need a jumping off point and something to relate to so that they can learn new material in a comfortable setting. So for example, if you're looking for something that explores the life sciences, a game or an app that looks at animals in the jungle might be a lot of fun for them, but you have to kind of think about what's going to be most meaningful. It might be more meaningful if it focuses on local birds or bugs that they can actually find on the playground, or if it incorporates common pets like cats or fish, for example. And the fourth pillar is that you want kids to have the opportunity to socially interact around the material. And this can take lots of forms, whether that's because the technology has a multiplayer setting so kids can use it together, or whether it allows kids to interact with or see the progress of other students online, with supervision, of course, or my favorite, if it encourages or supports kids' interactions with other people or objects in their own environment. So for example, augmented reality apps or apps that encourage kids to make stories from objects in their environments. So I know that's a lot. So one way to remember the 4 pillars, I came up with a little acronym, is E-AIMS, as in the aims that you have when you're looking for electronic or educational tools. So the E-AIMS are E for engaging, not distracting. Then AIMS is actively involved, meaningful, and social. And I think you can use those criteria to help you narrow down those resources out there and choose the best tool for your needs.
Yeah, thank you. And one more thing along those lines as well is everything that you said also applies for looking at EdTech solutions for kids with both physical and special cognitive special needs. So it's another thing to keep in mind. We're not doing a deep dive into it today, but it is something we will be discussing in the future. Andrew, next question, building on this theme. Nickelodeon's been doing some really interesting things with technology and media to engage parents and families. And I think it comes to a surprise probably to some of our participants that Nickelodeon really has this commitment to early learning STEM. So could you tell us a little bit about your work and the lessons you've learned from families and kids?
Absolutely. So, especially on the Nick Jr. side, I think we take our responsibility to create entertaining and educational programming very seriously. And at the outset of developing a new show, we're working with educational experts from various entities, from whether it's children's museums to any of our other nonprofit partners and to educators, just to make sure that when we are having a curriculum-based show like Blaze and the Monster Machines that focuses on STEM, that it's grounded in fundamental science that's appropriate for the age group. And then beyond that, our real focus is to make it accessible and fun. I mean, I think through Beyond the Backpack, our pro-social program, we've very quickly found that parents can quickly get overwhelmed with this idea if they are kind of hammered over the head with this sense of urgency. It can make it feel a little overwhelming. And so what we try really hard to do is to make things simple. Explain clearly that this is urgent, but that getting ready for kindergarten, learning STEM, focusing on literacy can be really simple as well. And that can also be fun, especially when you're engaging with your parents, you're engaging with your friends, and you're engaging with Nick Jr. characters. So I think I would mirror a lot of what was already said about this idea of relating it to real life and making sure that it's something fun for the kids to interact with. But then I would also layer on this idea that there should be co-viewing or co-participating with the parents and the child, regardless of the technology or the show. I think there's a lot of kind of color commentary that parents can add in. And we see that when we do focus groups, that there is a lot of co-viewing with moms and dads and grandparents. And when that's the case, children are getting a lot more out of these shows. And then I would say, the other thing is to make it as hands-on as possible. So, our shows are great, and especially starting back with Blue's Clues and Dora, we're very proud of our the development that we've done in the call and response style children's programming. But especially with all these new technologies that at our disposal, creating some of these really interactive episodes and webisodes and apps where, especially with Blaze and the Monster Machines, we can introduce these fundamental STEM concepts in a way that kids can lean forward and lean in and interact with. Is such a great opportunity. The more that the parents can engage with kids with technology, and the more that it can be accessible to the whole family, and the more it can be hands-on, that's when we see the success.
That's great, Andrew. We really appreciate that, and certainly at ED, we endorse exactly what you said, hands-on and much interaction with families, because we really want families engaged with the kids, because that's how children learn the most. So, Emily, I'm delighted to see you, a fellow Texan. I know Ready Rosie has some incredible partnerships with schools and museums and libraries. Can you tell us a little bit about those partnerships and how you've used them to use technology to advance STEM?
Absolutely, Libby. Thanks, and it is always good to see another Texan. So I know you'll be patient with my y'alls and my fixin' twos. So absolutely, what we found out as we kind of did testing groups and focus groups with families, really all over the country. Guess what the number one question that most families had about school? It was about STEM and math and how that's being taught in today's schools and how that's different than the way they felt like they learned it. And so the school partnership has become really the anchor of how, even though our end user of Ready Rosie is the parent and the family, we work through the schools because that is really the catalyst for trust, and that the parents know that the content that they're receiving and doing is really reaching the goals of the schools. And what we find most times when families interact with some of these activities is it breaks down some of that conflict and misunderstanding about what STEM and math instruction is. And instead of it being fuzzy math or weird thinking or anything like that, they begin to see, oh my goodness, here I get how we can just play a game and learn math. I get how we can draw these figures and get to the same end as math. And we've even had some parents, even though our content is just birth through third grade, we've even had parents tell us that they're learning new ways to think about math and problem solving and things like that along with their child. So it's a great opportunity, and I think the partnership between the schools really gives the parent that confidence that this is not just what I call random acts of parent engagement or random things that they can be doing with their child, but something that actually drives their child to do better with assessments and their ongoing school performance.
That's great. I love the focus on coherence and making sure that things don't feel so random, because it can be tough to navigate all the, and when you feel like things are different systems or they're not playing with each other, it makes it all the more complicated for parents, families, and educators to figure out what matters and how do you wade through all this stuff, you know, where we started talking about that. Celine, I know you all think about this a lot, and you are working to launch lots of new content across multiple platforms to support early STEM learning. I'm excited to hear about your work, and in particular, how some of the new content that you're developing differs from content that's currently available, and some of the key things that you consider when building new content for our youngest learners.
Absolutely. We're very excited. We have a lot of new shows in production. Two in particular I want to talk about. One is called Dot. Dot is based off a book by Randy Zuckerberg, and it follows a tech-savvy 8-year-old who balances and models how technology can be used as a tool to enhance real-world experiences while still being involved in the real world. And with Dot, we are working with Industrial Brothers, who is creating the show, and the show itself is helping kids learn about STEM and about using technology, and then to supplement that, we are creating an app called Dotopedia, which is referenced in the show, and Dotopedia is meant to be a really cool interactive reference tool for our youngest learners, where they are going to be able to use their mobile phones to create content and be part of this Dotopedia world while also consuming content and learning in new and different ways. And secondly, we have a show that will be premiering on PBS Kids called Splash and Bubbles. And Splash and Bubbles is about 4 fish that explore the ocean, and through marine biology and ocean conservation and learning all about these cool fish and the environments, we are bringing the ocean to kids, and also we are creating games and tools and content that will support the show, as well as learning and being part of the Splash world. With that, we have a tool that we're really excited about that would be joint media engagement focused, and so we're hoping that parents and kids will together use technology to be involved in the world around them and really get into the world. I'm sorry, a little nervous. Okay.
You're doing great.
Well, that was great. We just took our grandkids to the aquarium and had a very successful trip, so I know that Splash and Bubbles is going to be very popular at our household. Thanks so much. So Kim, we really appreciate all that the Heising-Simons Foundation has done in early learning. You all have just really been a standout, and we appreciate your partnership in so many ways. Tell us a little bit about what the foundation has, some of the investments you've made in technologically delivered approaches to learning experiences for kids and adults, and the rationale for those investments. What are you learning that you think could be accomplished better through technology and media? And then what do you see as the power and the promise of technology and media?
Sure, great, Libby. The Foundation's made a number of investments in technology-delivered learning approaches for both kids and adults. I'm going to focus on just a few examples in our short time today. Through 2 grants, the Foundation supported the Fred Rogers Company's Peg Plus Cat and Odd Squad, which are 2 educational properties focused on early math. The rationale for these investments is really multifaceted. The first one is television media particularly has just tremendous reach. Nearly every child in America potentially could be reached. So television really has this power to bring high-quality STEM learning experiences to kids from all kinds of backgrounds, in all kinds of neighborhoods, and it brings it right into their homes. Second, those broadcast episodes that are created really can be repurposed and used in other ways, in creative ways to support other kinds of learning. So for example, with funding from another organization, Peg Plus Cat episodes have been used as the basis of a program that pairs young children, like preschoolers, kindergartners, with older children, mentor children. And these kids watch together in their classrooms, and then the older kids, I think they're in 3rd grade, take the lead on doing some hands-on math activities with the younger children. So that becomes a mentoring program, a social-emotional learning program, as much as a math program. Another example is that Peg Plus Cat episodes, again with funding, I believe, from the National Science Foundation, have been used to develop professional development programs for teachers around math and social-emotional development. Thus, the initial investment that a foundation like mine or other foundations make in broadcast can be leveraged in new ways that reach new audiences in new ways. The brand, as these brands become beloved, as the Jim Henson Company brands and Nickelodeon brands become beloved, they can be used to inspire kids to join Odd Squad themed summer camps or to play with Odd Squad games and apps. And this deepens the learning that they get from watching the television. So this generativity is what I think of that as. It's really a particular strength of media. Another part of the rationale for investment comes because shows like this are fun. They engage, they entertain, and they really have power to combine, in our case, math and joy. And that's an equation that unfortunately many of us adults never learned. We want something different for our kids. So the rationale for investment is that well-designed media can really help ensure that kids have experienced math, science differently and more positively than many of us did when we were young. The idea of reach and leveraging a recognized and trusted messenger was part of the Foundation's rationale for investing in a teacher professional development project with the Sesame Workshop. It was called Make Believe with Math. And Sesame Workshop designed, tested, and implemented this online professional development course aimed at early childhood educators. Over 6,000 people registered for that course, which was far more than was expected. And one of the things that teachers could do was engage with these materials when it made sense for them. So they could engage in professional learning. It's often called pajama PD, I think, because you can, in your pajamas, you can develop yourself as a professional. So this media, again, reached right out and got to these adult learners in their homes when it was convenient for them. So for an initial investment and some maintenance funding, a technology-delivered professional development opportunity could reach beyond even those 6,000 educators in a very cost-effective way, a more cost-effective way than in-person methods by and large. So there's a lot more that we could talk about, of course, but reach, convenience, coming to where the learner is, generativity, and the potential to combine STEM with joy and excitement represent key aspects of the power and promise of media and technology for supporting early STEM learners and teachers.
Thank you.
Well, and speaking of Sesame Workshop, the Joan Gans Cooney Center spun off of Sesame Workshop to really look at research around media use and technology. Elizabeth, can you tell us a little bit about how developmental research plays into your work, and particularly what do you think about the use of these technologies and media platforms for children under 2? We'd really love to hear about your considerations for our youngest children.
Sure, yeah. Developmental research plays a huge role in my work. So, for example, I mentioned before those 4 principles for how children learn that apply across most children. I'm always thinking about those, and those come directly from research. And a lot of fantastic developmental research has demonstrated that for really young children through about 3 years of age, that social interaction pillar is actually especially important. It's important for all kids, but especially for these very young children. They really are wired at that age to pay attention to and to learn from social interaction. So the things that meet the learning pillars that I mentioned before for these kids, the things that most engage them, the things that are most meaningful and that get them most actively involved, those things are social. And if you don't know that, you can really go down the wrong track. So for kids under 3, if you want them to learn something from a screen, you really need to be thinking about this. It has to, the technology or the content either has to be social itself, for example, a video chat interaction with a relative who might be showing them something new, or it needs to encourage what we were talking about earlier, this joint media engagement between the child and an adult who's with them, so that there's some sort of social interaction going on around that educational material. And one way that videos can get around this is to simulate that kind of social interaction by using a character that the child has become familiar with. So you'll notice that Mr. Rogers and Elmo will ask a question directly to the camera as though they're talking to the kids, and then wait for a response for them. And in Blue's Clues and several other shows, you can even hear the voice of the child responding back. So these things, they weren't always that way, and this is the result of a lot of important developmental research that has shown us how kids at various ages are learning the best. So I think about this kind of thing a lot. How do these learning principles change very subtly for different age groups? How can we develop technologies that are tailored to specific groups? And then how can we communicate those learning principles to parents and to practitioners to help them make better choices with technology for their children?
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and I know that, and it's just having the research sort of ground us all in the work that we're doing in early technology and early STEM and education overall is really crucial, and the more ways that we can figure out how to ensure that research is in the hands of those who are making decisions and building new content and finding new ways to support teachers and all of that is really crucial. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Emily, one of the questions we hear a lot from people is, what does success look like in this realm, in the world of early technology, in the world of early STEM, when working with our youngest learners? What does it mean for a program or an organization to be successful? I know you all have thought a lot about this and work across so many different stakeholders. I would love if you could talk a little bit about that question and how you think about it at Ready Rosie.
Thanks, Melissa. No, that's a great question. And when we started, it's hard to believe how much the landscape has changed in just 4.5 years. We started really looking at, of course, how do we equip and inspire parents and caregivers. And a lot of that, the research about the most effective things that parents and caregivers can do are actually behind closed doors. It's what they do while they're making dinner and what they do before their bedtime routine. Those are actually the things that change outcomes for children. So those are hard to measure, right? As we're sitting somewhere else, it's hard to have accurate measures of those things. And traditionally, as we tried to really equip and engage parents, it involved things like sending home books, sending home tip sheets, ideas, folders, packets, and you cross your fingers and hope that they didn't get scrunched down in the bottom of the backpack and never get seen or utilized or read. And so I think that's one of the most meaningful things that we've been able to provide our school partners is some actual data on how families are utilizing these video tips. So we started with our data just being able to measure simply, were parents watching these quick video tips? That morphed very quickly when we actually included some gamification, where parents were actually reporting, hey, we watched it, but we also did it. Because the goal is that they can watch a game, and then literally put the device away, put the screen away, and have, like Elizabeth was talking about, have some of that social, real experiences between adult and child. But then we even took it a step further, which I'm very excited about. We've been piloting all this spring, where all of our content is actually driven by a communication between a teacher. So the way it works is that a teacher might be experiencing something in the class. Maybe they're learning about one-to-one correspondence in a pre-K classroom, or they're exploring patterns. They can communicate that to the parents and actually text or email video clips that say, here's what we're learning, try these 3 games at home. Or your child is a rock star at algebraic thinking, you won't believe it, try these games. Or your child could use some extra support in their problem solving skills. Here's 3 games that make that fun and interactive. But what's neat is then the parent can interact back with the teacher around the content to ask questions, say, hey, we played this game and this was the response, or even send a video back. So that two-way communication is a whole new level of data, right? It goes beyond the anecdotal or the quantifying data, and actually looks at some of that qualitative data and responsiveness. And ultimately, to use that data to inform instruction and inform the way we really make decisions in the classroom as well.
I love that. The whole idea of making routines learning opportunities for every child, and the way you empower parents, we really like that. So Andrew, what can you add about building evidence and measuring success?
Sure. So, being in media, I think we have traditionally measured success through reach. So we're in 100 million homes, or through Beyond the Backpack, we're distributing 30,000 toolkits, and hosting a number of events. And I think, obviously we have much greater tools to measure some of that success, certainly measure reach. But now with our Beyond the Backpack On The Go app, where we text parents tips, we're able to actually kind of measure engagement, which we're finding is a much better measurement for whether or not people are internalizing the resources and then utilizing the resources that we're providing. But even engagement only gets so far. So I think we're still looking forward to partnering with someone on looking at the actual impact of that. And I think measuring impact, it can be one of the most difficult things, especially in this space. It's exciting to figure out a way to get over that, but at this point we've been really proud of our reach and of our engagement, and I think we've been confident in knowing that if we're putting good information out, that we're working with great partners to put together, and people are engaging with it, then it's of course having an impact, and I think it's just a matter of working with the right people to make sure that we can have a better way to measure what that impact actually is, regardless of whether it's early STEM, early literacy, or other educational areas.
Celine, the folks on the Hangout today are really coming at us from a variety of different education backgrounds in terms of in-school and out-of-school and general caregivers. What are your thoughts about this in terms of in and out of school experiences and caregiving settings?
Sure. We love being able to reach schools and caregiving settings, and really believe in all of the things that we've been talking about today around joint media engagement, being able to watch the show and have kids invested emotionally in characters and these worlds, and then being able to provide real-world experiences that families and caregivers and teachers can do is very important to all of the work that we do. So Sid the Science Kid, for example, is a great show that we have, and we have corresponding curriculum associated with every single episode. So that's available on PBS Parents, and it is widely distributed and used in schools as their science curriculum. We love that. Dinosaur Train is another one of our shows, and we currently are doing our own summer challenge where we're encouraging parents and caregivers and families to go out and watch, play, explore, and learn. And so being able to connect from the television to outdoors to activities that you can do in school and in caregiving settings, we just think it knocks it out of the park, and we're really happy to be in that space.
That's great. I love thinking about just the various different ways that technology and media can serve as a bridge between what's happening in school and out of school with consistent stories and the tools that you all are putting in people's hands that are research-based, and you're constantly sort of evaluating their success and refining. I think there's a ton of potential there, and as Kim mentioned, thinking about the professional development opportunities for educators that accompany all of those the content that's created. And Kim, I want to go back to you because you talked so aspirationally and inspirationally about the potential of technology and media. And not to be a downer, but we know that in some cases we aren't there yet. And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about where you hope the field might go, and maybe some challenges that you're hoping that folks who are listening or will listen later might take on.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. I don't think it's a downer at all. I think we've heard today from people who have accepted some of the challenges that were challenges 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, a year ago, and it's always changing, and we're always coming up with new and creative ways to solve those challenges. So, one challenge is, as Andrew mentioned, how important it is, we know, for children to co-view and to television shows with adults, with their older siblings, someone who can answer their questions, someone who can point out key ideas, who can ask questions of them to help them solidify their learning. But we also know that practically, parents are often using media so that they can make dinner. So what do we do? How do we be respectful of that, and at the same time create the kinds of joint media, we've heard a lot about joint media engagement, those kinds of opportunities that are inviting or maybe even requiring in some cases that another player play alongside the child, so that we're really supporting the kinds of learning experiences around media in which an adult other is interacting with a child around the experience. So really continuing to work in that area, I think, is going to be important. And it's, it really has social emotional benefits too, because you're spending time together working on something, a goal that's shared through joint media engagement. So I'd like to see more attention paid to that, and we've heard some really terrific examples of that today from our other panelists. I've also heard some great examples. I mean, Celine was just talking about it, of linking screen activities to offline experiences. And I would just continue, developers to continue to do that kind of thing, because we really want to find ways to use screens to inspire, as they can do so well, off-screen activity, off-screen learning experiences. We want them to motivate, inspire things that happen outside of screens. Without them, I mean, there's nothing like digging your hands down in the dirt, right, and getting dirty. So I know Sid the Science Kid inspires kids to get out and dig around in their backyards by doing episodes around that, and then providing lots of online tips for parents and get kids out and having those experiences. So really finding more and more creative ways to give kids and inspire a wide variety of learning experiences for them in early STEM, with screens and without. Andrew mentioned the challenges attendant with measuring impact. How do we know that these things we're creating are positively influencing children and adults who learn with them, and getting to those folks to find that out, and having the measurement tools that help us know that we've actually changed someone's maybe attitude about early STEM or their knowledge around a particular concept. That remains a challenge, I think, that we have yet to completely solve, as Andrew said. Another place that we're having some great leverage and great impact is personalizing learning experiences. So Russ has mentioned today the importance of ensuring that the things that we create for screens are accessible to all kinds of learners. So making sure that we're incorporating universal design principles into what we're creating for screens and for broadcast. and also creating learning experiences that level as a learner needs more support or more challenge to personalize the learning experience that they're having through media. Those are some of the challenges. I'd also say that this balance between online and offline, or on-screen and off-screen time, comes up too in the teacher professional development area. That, as I mentioned earlier, online learning opportunities are really convenient, and they can reach people in a cost-effective way when they actually have time to devote to their own learning, when they're outside of a classroom where they're devoted to the learning of children. Still, that effective professional development involves, it has certain characteristics like teachers collaborating with each other, maybe with a master teacher, a teaching coach. It involves using your new strategies and skills in a classroom and then reflecting on that. And so how do we ensure that these online learning opportunities bring in some of the benefits of in-person professional development? What are the best ways to do that? Because I think through media and online experiences, we have this great promise of reaching so many adults with the support and the resources that they can use to more effectively teach children. So I think that's another area of challenge and I think great promise, and we'll get there. I have no doubt.
I love that. Libby, Russ, I'm curious, before we have some final thoughts from our panelists, what jumps out at you? We covered a lot of ground today. There's obviously a ton more that we could dive into. What has jumped out at you, or things you want to highlight, or things you want to think more about?
I think I'm excited because we're all on the same page. We want more interaction. We want to partner. We want to engage caregivers. We want to engage teachers. We want to engage parents. Hope grandparents as well. Want kids interacting with each other, and that we're all looking to the future. We know we have some great products and some great activities and things designed, but we really are looking forward, and that's exciting to me.
Yeah, I think for me the big issues here are that we make media that are fun and engaging for all kids, and again, I think the theme of thinking about universal design principles that actually engage all children, and especially as we've got things, we've all seen Pokemon Go pop up on our radars this week. When we start using that type of technology for education, what are the best design principles we can use to implement that? We really don't know at this point, and we really need to find out. So these are research questions in addition to implementation questions and best practices that we really need to solve, and really do so quickly.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm left with the power and potential of technology across so many different aspects of early STEM education. And really, as we think about how we ensure that all of our kids that we're encouraging them to explore and do all the things that they're born knowing how to do. I think technology does have a really powerful role to play in equity, and it's so great that we have so many people who are working to figure that out. And I'm just excited about continuing to build this community and sort of struggle through all the really hard, knotty problems that you all are grappling with on a daily basis, and figure out ways that we can support each other as we ultimately keep this goal of impacting every child in our minds. So,
and I'd also like to say, for the folks who are out there in internet land, we really are depending on everyone who's participating today and your broader communities to help continue pushing all of this forward, because it's an important aspect for our children, and really it's an all hands on deck problem.
And I'd love to hear some final reflections from each of our panelists. So, as you think about any advice for our audience members who are hoping to do similar exemplary work, either lessons learned or advice to not repeat in the future, or thinking about where you were 5 years ago and things you wish you had known then. Obviously technology changes quite frequently, so maybe that's an unfair question, but why don't we start with Andrew, and then we'll sort of go from left to right. Any advice, closing thoughts?
Sure. Well, you mentioned the power and potential of technology, and I think we're just so excited by that and everything that we have at our disposal to put out there. And I think it's really just a matter of layering on this idea of responsible use of technology. And so I think it's great to have such wonderful partners that we work with, and all of you, to help guide in that right way. So I think any opportunity we have to work with any of you to continue to take this technology and build on that potential to impact kids' lives is something that we're very much interested in. And I think the idea of this awesome technology can sometimes get a little convoluted too. Sometimes it's best to keep it simple, and simple can be the most accessible for people too. I mean, I know we run into it on the pro-social side where some of the folks that need these resources the most don't have the same access to Nickelodeon's channels or the internet, or if they do, they don't necessarily have a printer to get the printables off. So I know that's why we've been really proud of our text program, because we can get right to people. It doesn't even have to be a smartphone. It could just be a simple phone, and get great tips right into their hands so that they can use it with their kids or the kids that they babysit or their grandkids. And so with this great power, we can also still kind of keep it simple and get that out there. So thanks for having me.
Great, yeah. Celine, your 1-minute thoughts.
Yeah, I think that these kind of things and utilizing the community that is trying to create content for kids and help our youngest learners learn while having fun is really the backbone of what we do. We are very lucky to have fantastic advisors and experts in their own fields, be it marine biology or early child education. And the more that we can get smart and learn about the most effective ways to teach while also entertaining, I think is the best course in terms of starting to get the platforms ready to bring out to the public.
Great. Elizabeth.
Sorry, I was unmuting. So, I mean, there's no surprise here, but I think my advice is to use research, use what we do know, and those 4 pillars of learning that I described earlier, those are pretty universal, which is great when we're thinking about technology that changes so quickly, like we were saying a minute ago. And they're also important for everyone of all ages. You can tailor it according to specific groups, like I was saying, with really young kids, you want to focus on that critical social element, but those 4 pillars are pretty universal. So if you're thinking about professional development for educators, you still want to be thinking about those same things as you would when you're teaching really young children. You want to support their learning by ensuring that content that you present and the pedagogy involved, whether that's on using technology or not, that it's engaging and not distracting, that it actively involves them and asks them to participate, that it's meaningful and situated in a familiar context, and that your learners have the opportunity to socially interact around that material, as Kim was saying. So I think having those universal principles that have come from basic research can be so helpful when you're in the middle of this this very fast-paced technological environment. And one other plug that I want to put out there is that there are online resources that you can use, like Common Sense Media, the website, where you can go and check out the technology, the technologies that you're interested in, or the media that you're interested in, and they have experts there who evaluate all kinds of technological tools, and that can give you a bit of guidance as well.
It's great. They were another commitment maker involved in the White House Summit and did a whole page on early STEM, so great to mention them. Emily, thoughts from you?
Thank you. Well, I think all of our closing statements are really wrapped up in kind of our particular passion. And so I think my closing thoughts would definitely revolve around building that capacity in our families. And I think STEM is probably the most crucial area that we can think about this, because it's often an area that is not promoted, and we're not encouraging families on exactly what that actually looks like. And so I guess my final thought is just to share my dream and ask that you would join with me in thinking about this. But if we really were to use technology to scale high quality human interaction, so that when we walk into any grocery store, we see families comparing and contrasting and measuring and talking and adding and subtracting. When we walk into any restaurant, we see families having those same interactions. And so that if that was happening, we could really change the world as far as STEM learning goes. And so as we think about building capacity in children and in our teachers as well, I hope that we really think about how technology can literally change the efficacy of a child's first teacher, which really is their family and their home environment.
Great. And Kim, closing thoughts from you.
Gosh, there's so much that could be said. This has been really exciting. I am about as old as Sesame Street is, and as I think about where we've come from then, the question that motivated that was, could television be used as a tool to teach children? Think about where we are today compared to that question. All of the technologies that we know can be used to teach children, and we're working to find ways to use them creatively and most effectively. It's just a thrilling place to be and very exciting to be part of, especially when we're turning our attention to early STEM, which has been something I've been involved with and thought was so critical for now, I don't know, gosh, I think 15 years or more, that it's getting so much attention now. So for me, it's just been very exciting to see the coming together of how do we use technology, how do we support children as STEM learners, and how do we use technology as a tool to do that in the most effective and engaging ways possible.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And so we have just a few minutes left today. I want to thank Libby and Russ, our outstanding commitment makers. What an amazing group of individuals and organizations. Thank you for being with us. And everyone watching on the live stream. I would also be remiss if I didn't thank the amazing intern team here at ED. We have Darcy and Rena with us in the room who've been live tweeting away. I know Allison is out there watching live as well, who joined us earlier this summer and helped us set everything up. We feel so fortunate to have received great commitments from you all and are very excited to continue the conversation and continue to build this community. As a quick reminder, we have another hangout scheduled for Wednesday, August 3rd at 3 p.m. Eastern, and this topic we will be talking about system-wide early STEM efforts. And we'll hear from a number of states and districts and nonprofits who are working to impact early STEM education across full systems, and we hope that you can all join us for that. We will make the recording available, so feel free to share this recording with your friends, your colleagues, parents, families, grandparents. The more the merrier, as there were really important topics and lessons that we can all take from today's conversation. Thank you for being with us and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Take care, everybody.